I've always known about Southern Miss. Both my parents are alumni. I have aunts and uncles that are alumni, so it's very near and dear to my family. I went to basketball camp when I was, I guess, 8th or 9th grade, somewhere along there. I'd spent time on campus doing other things. But really, I chose it. One, they had a degree that I thought I wanted to go into at the time. And the other reason I enrolled is that this honors college intrigued me as far as the ability to have sort of this smaller college within a bigger university. And those were probably the two deciding factors.
I didn't have a choice, and I really didn't. Basically, I had a 8-year-old younger sister who was hospitalized at Yale University Hospital in Connecticut. In any case, the family was devastated. We weren't rich to begin with, and fortunately, I had been partly raised in the Florida Panhandle. And when I started looking for inexpensive colleges, Southern Miss popped out.
It was really in my DNA. I grew up in a Golden Eagle family as my dad graduated from here, so I was captured by the Golden Eagle culture immediately.
Well, you know, by the time I graduated from high school, I already had a lot of Southern Miss connections. We were a Southern Miss family, and I never really considered going anywhere else. My grandmother had attended Southern Miss. My mother had attended Southern Miss. Several of my aunts and uncles and cousins had attended Southern Miss, and so we were a Southern Miss family. And then that continued with my wife Rosie attending Southern Miss, and both our children attending Southern Miss as well. In fact, between the four of us, we have 7 degrees from Southern Miss, so we're very much a part of the Southern Miss family and very proud of that.
I went to high school in Slidell, Louisiana. My class was about 450 in my senior class. Most of my senior classmates were going to go to LSU. That was all the talk. I was not very popular in high school. My twin brother was the class president and I was just his sister. And so I decided I wanted a new perspective. And so I started looking close to home, but different, somewhere different. So that's how I found USM.
It was a process. Obviously, I received a football scholarship to Southern Miss, and so went through the whole process of the whole recruitment process, and being from Alabama, it was the process of elimination. And at the end of the day, I felt like Southern Miss was the best place for me to further my education.
Well, I have a lot, but I think I probably have to say my most fond memories. I met my wife there, so I would be remiss if I gave a different answer. But a lot of fond memories. I did meet my wife, and but just built a lot of friendships. Had a lot of fun. Wish I could go to college again. I've got a daughter looking at college now, and both my wife and I both said, boy, college is something we would do over again. You need to look at it as a fun time. And so lots of memories, but that's got to be the biggest.
I liked founding things, and I still like founding things, so that consequently at Southern I founded the French Club, for instance, which became an honorary fraternity as time went on. I founded Phi Alpha Theta, the history honorary fraternity, and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So, and somebody even made me sports editor of the yearbook. And I have to say that if there's anything that I was not qualified to do, it was to be sports editor of the yearbook. But nevertheless, we survived.
Well, I was a 4-year ROTC student while I was here, so many of my activities revolved around ROTC, including playing on intramural flag football all 4 years, intramural softball, marching competitions, Arnold Air Society, and almost anything that was involved in ROTC. Probably one of the most fond memories was I worked in the student union, and I was mopping the student union floor one day, and I had that evening a blind date with a young lady, and unbeknownst to me, she was going to come by and check me out before we went out. So she and her sister showed up, and there I was just working away, mopping the floor, and here we are 41 years later, 2 children and a couple grandchildren, and it all worked out. And that's got to be my fondest memory. And I got to tell you, every time my wife and I come back to USM, we kind of know the general area where we first met. And we go there, and I always ask her out again.
I spent the first part of my undergraduate years in Bond Hall, and so probably longer than a lot of other students, but I really got to meet some great friends there and was involved in a lot of campus activities and events and things that normally come with being in college. As I got to the end of my sophomore year, I joined a group of guys that were starting a new fraternity, which turned out to be the Sigma Chi fraternity. And that was a great experience as well, because we're starting something new, and that whole experience gave me an opportunity to do something special, to become really a better student, a better leader, and a better person.
My sophomore year, I decided to pledge to go through Rush, but I knew I wanted to be a Delta Gamma because we knew several of those girls that were in that sorority because they were from our hometown, Slidell. So we went through Rush, and luckily we went Delta Gamma. So I could only really handle that, keep my studies up, be a little sister for the fraternity, and then Delta Gamma. But I did serve as president of DG in 1982. So I lived in Hillcrest my first year that I was at USM, and I always had to walk to campus. And most of the time I walked, but because I wore jeans and t-shirts, my hair in a ponytail, hardly any makeup. But every now and then I think I'll dress up. And back in those times, all the fraternity guys, sororities, everybody would come to the hub and sit on the steps because the post office was right inside those doors. And so you knew when you went to the hub, everybody was going to be out there, just kind of, watching people walk by. So one day I decided I was going to wear this nice dress and get dressed up, high heels, and I took the bus to campus. And I'm thinking, I'm looking pretty good. I curled my hair, and I get to the hub, and I turn and say goodbye to the bus driver, thank you, and I turn to go down the steps, and immediately slide down the steps, land on my rear end in front of everybody. So what I thought immediately is, oh, okay, God, I know, I needed a lesson, thinking I was too much.
Obviously being in athletics, a collegiate football player, that takes up a lot of your time. So majority of my time was with that. But also the interesting thing is I really started learning about Boys and Girls Clubs at Southern Miss because I volunteered at the Boys and Girls Clubs a lot, and I spent a lot of time at the Boys and Girls Clubs. So hence, that's what I'm doing. What I'm doing with my professional career is running the Boys and Girls Clubs in my hometown. I guess a lot of my stuff was centered around, what we did in terms of football. We knew about all the great things that were going on for homecoming, but the football team had a curfew, and we snuck out after curfew to enjoy the homecoming festivities. And we were at a little venue, and our head coach rose up and catches us out. And so that was a little embarrassing for us. And so it made the next week at practice very painful because he punished us with conditioning.
So, early on, sort of when I finished training and I got my first real job, we did, join the Eagle Club. We became lifetime members of the Alumni Association. We've done what we could. One of the things that we're proud of that we've done recently is we have started an honors college scholarship that we hope will start paying a little bit out to some students that need it in the near future. And we hope to keep that going, but just a little bit to give back to some of the things that we had when we went through.
That just goes way back to the person who admitted me to Southern Mississippi in August of the year that I was to be a freshman, Aubrey Lucas. There's been an association with Aubrey, and Aubrey is the one who said, now's the time to step up.
Well, I've come back often. Most of it during my military career was associated with ROTC. I came back often as a graduation speaker or as a mentor and guide and counselor to the young ROTC students of what could be and the direction. So came back often for that, and then upon retirement from the Air Force, and we moved back to the state. In our positions, we've been able to work closely with the staff at Southern Mississippi to help them building different projects that benefited the university, the local area, and the state.
Yeah, well, I think that Rosie, my wife, and I have been members of the Alumni Association since 1987, except for 1 year, and we don't know what happened that 1 year. That apparently we lost our dues statement or whatever. But we're life members now. And we've continued to be a part of Southern Miss and being a member of the Alumni Association and going to athletic events and bowl games, and where those things that have really been an important part of our family. In my career at Colin, I had an opportunity to continue working a lot with the Southern Miss administration and staff through the years, and that was always enjoyable to still have that link back to USM.
Well, I, of course, joined the Alumni Association, and I have I served on a presidential transition team years ago, and then in 2008, Haley Barber asked me to become a trustee, appointed me as a trustee for the IHL board. So through that experience, 10 years serving in that role, I had the opportunity to work with various presidents, and Dr. Bennett and I have worked together on certain bond finances, financial matters. We've also done some strategic planning discussions, and so I've really enjoyed working with him.
When you're married with kids, and I'm not in the state of Mississippi, and so being 5 hours away, and when you have children, and they're involved in sports and athletics and extracurricular activities, that tends to take up the majority of your time. But as they get older, it's something that I definitely want to have a bigger part in, of being involved in the Alumni Association and just with the Southern Miss program.
You know, so I would say it's a huge honor, and it means a lot. You know, it certainly is not something I ever expected, and the fact that, you know, it happened and here we are, I'm proud of it. You know, so I would just say I'm honored.
I think it creates an indissoluble tie that I'm very proud of, and that I think indicates the university's fondness for me. So I'm very impressed with the University of Southern Mississippi and its treatment of me, and I hope that Southern Miss is impressed with me and my treatment of them.
Well, I think it's very humbling, but it's also an honor of a lifetime. But perhaps most important, it means that all those people that have helped guide, shape, and direct me all these years, it's a celebration of what they did. And I've been able to take a part of USM with me throughout my entire life.
Well, I've given that a lot of thought, and I was really stunned when I got the call from Jerry DeFada. And quite honestly, when he first called me, I thought maybe he needed me to do something or had a favor that he might need with the group around Jackson. Of course, I've been willing to help him. So I was really caught off guard. So I am tremendously humbled and honored, and just really almost speechless about getting the recognition, and I'm very, very grateful.
This is, I don't want to get emotional. It's the biggest honor I've ever had. It really does.
I was shocked when I got the call, and so I'm completely humbled with this honor. When I think about my journey, you know, little kid from Huntsville, Alabama, going over to Mississippi to further my education, and just to be recognized, you know, is very humbling to me. And I feel like, you know, this is part of God's plan for my life. And I'm just humbled by the opportunity to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think it's a legacy that my family and my kids could be definitely proud of.
Southern Miss to the top.
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 Southern Miss to the top.